Well, let's go ahead and get started. If Matt shows up, he can catch up as we move along. Call this meeting of the Fremont County Board of Zoning Adjustment to order. The first item on the agenda is to approve today's agenda. We have one item for consideration. Is there anything to add or to change on today's agenda? If not, the chair will entertain a motion to approve today's agenda.
I so move to approve today's agenda.
Need a second? Second by Tim Bennett. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Second item is the Board of Zoning Adjustment minutes of the August 20th meeting. Since we have two new members as part of the quorum today, and they were not part of the meeting of August 20th, they're not in a position to consider the minutes of August 20th. So procedurally,
We don't have a quorum.
we don't have a quorum for the minutes, so I'll have you put the consideration of the August 20th minutes on the next agenda.
Ed, if I can interrupt you real fast, I have talked to the county attorney about that. If they watched the meeting through the YouTube channel, they would be able to vote on the minutes. I'm not sure if they watched it, though.
If the other members watched it?
If Kevin and Timothy,
Oh.
you did not, okay.
The alternates.
Oh, okay. No, you didn't either, Tim. The last meeting? Okay. All right, so we'll put it on the next agenda. I do want to welcome Tim Bennett and Kevin Brown to the meeting today. We have this one item to consider, which is basically a reconsideration of 24-002, and I have some procedural questions before we actually begin, and that would be, first of all, the email that Danielle sent out on September 9th. You stated in there that we noted there was some misleading, inaccurate, and false information provided at that meeting. What I would like to inquire is, was any of that intentionally submitted to be misleading, or was it overlooked?
I do not believe that it was intentional. I think a lot of it was overlooked.
And then you discovered it as you started to sort through?
I discovered it when I started listening to the minutes and comparing the application to what was proposed.
Okay. Procedurally today, I'm thinking since the Board of Zoning Adjustment already approved the variance, when it comes time for action, we would be looking towards a motion to reconsider the original action of approval of the variance. So just a note to the board members as to probably how we would proceed once we hear all the information today. Also procedurally, as I looked through the highlights that you provided in our packet, you bring up several things that of these items need to be reconsidered. So I guess my question is if the board wants to consider approval of the variance, are we considering each and every item, or can we look at those individual issues and say, even if a variance would be approved, we'd still be in a position where we could say, pick out specifically if something needs to be addressed.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, because there's multiple issues laid out here. And so as I turn it over to staff, rather than laying out each and every item in one fell swoop, I'd like to kind of stagger it a little bit, talk about each individual item, and make sure that the board is clear on each of the specifics that you're going to bring up today before we look at everything as a total package. Does that make sense?
Yes, would you like to vote on them separately as well?
Well, I think we'll just kind of, that's a possibility. I mean, that's what was running through my mind as I read this, because I'm thinking, we've got individual items here that we may not want to provide a variance for, but still have a requirement. So, so we'll look at it as that possibility.
Okay.
So I'll turn it over to staff to begin, wherever you would like to start.
All right. We just covered the introduction of it and why we're back here.
Let me preface, do you have any questions procedurally, particularly from our two new members, to understand what your role is and what the role of the board is?
No.
Okay. All right. All right. Go ahead.
I'd like to figure out whether there's a time when we can speak as well to address
I'm sorry?
we'd like to have a chance to address the misleading items. And
Oh,
stuff.
you absolutely. And if we take each one individually, you'll have that opportunity to address each one individually. That's why I didn't want to move everything into one giant group, but address each one specifically. Okay, go ahead.
All right. On the application number 20, it stated there's one off-street parking space per the Fremont County zoning resolution on a mini storage facility. It's one space per 100 units, one space per employee, and then 1 to 25 spaces, there's one ADA required. Right now, they're proposing just one space. That would be their first variance on it. Let me get to the right one for you guys. Our department does recommends denial for the off-street parking.
Okay,
per
now,
sec-
can you reference the application number that you provided in our packet?
Yes.
What number is that specifically? Is that 20?
Number 20K.
Okay. Go ahead.
Per section 5.4, or off-street parking is the first reason why we recommend the denial. We need one space per 100 units, one employee space, one ADA space. Section 7432 for the BOZA powers, the department feels this is an unnecessary hardship the owner of the property is creating upon themselves. And section 7433, BOZA powers, the overall shape of the property does not make this property undevelopable. This is a conforming lot and can meet all minimum requirements of section 414.5. That's their first variance request.
Okay.
But if they only had one parking space, it would have to be handicap accessible, wouldn't it?
Yeah, they're only calling out one, and it's not an ADA, it's just a one standard
But by
space.
law, don't they have to have an ADA?
They do,
So there would be two.
Yes, so they would need to actually have three, one for their units, one for their employee, and one ADA.
Okay, any other questions on 20K, 20.K? You want to address that?
I'm sorry, because I won't hear it from the interest agreement. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we can provide three. We have no employee on this site, so we only provided one, which could be made accessible, but we can provide three, no problem. So if you deny this variance, I would actually recommend you deny it because we can provide it, no problem.
Okay. Next item?
Okay?
Unless, does the board want to proceed to the next item? Okay, go ahead.
On application 21D, they're requesting a front yard setback of 10 feet In the business zone district, the setback is a minimum of 40 feet. There is going to be a change in it. So right now, they only have a temporary access from CDOT. So their front yard will actually become their side yard, when then it would be a 25-foot minimum setback. And that's part of the application 21H. 21E requests the rear yard setback at 10, but on their site plan, it does show a 60-foot setback. And application 21G requests a side yard setback adjacent to a street of 10. H Street is platted along the side, which will actually be the front once they improve H Street, and then it would be a required of 40 feet setback.
Can you go to the map and point out the specifics of those three setback areas so we know what we're looking at?
All right, front yard at 10, and that's right now on the one that is right off of Highway 115. Yes. That will be their side yard when H Street is platted, or not platted, I'm sorry, improved. And their side street,
Okay, here's something that preyed on my mind as I kept reading through this. And I know that the Director of Department of Transportation commented on that as well, at sight distance if H Street is opened. I would think this board would be concerned about what are the prospects, what are the likelihoods of H Street actually being improved and open to traffic.
more than likely that's going to be decided on their CDP application, if that will be an item for discussion at that time.
On what application?
Their commercial development plan,
Oh, okay.
they have that application in with us right now, but we can't go further with it until we know about these variances.
So you're saying that the department could force improvement of H Street?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Just from their access to Highway 115 or further north?
So it would be right on this side. They would take access on I and then H.
Well, okay, so the department, which will eventually go to the Board of County Commissioners for a commercial development plan for this entire parcel. Is that right?
Yes.
So it's like the chicken or the egg. If H Street is developed, then CDOT will not allow that access off of
Yes.
115.
Yes.
So wouldn't it make sense to find out if you're going to actually improve H Street before we issue a variance?
It does make sense, but we can't give them that variance knowing, or we can't say it's going to be improved right now. I know as far as the transportation office, they will not be liable for improving the roadways, but per their
Because the developer will
application,
have to do the improvement to
the
H Street.
developer would be responsible for it, yes.
Is the developer planning to improve H Street in your commercial development plan? No. You prefer Highway 115 access? Sure.
Push the button.
Okay, so I want to start at the beginning a little, if that's okay.
Okay.
So I'm sure reading through these comments, I know by the time I got done with them, reading the words misled, misinformation was frustrating. And what's frustrating for me at the moment is that the comments that you received this last week, we didn't receive till 3 days after the BOZA meeting was completed. So we were never given those comments before we walked in the room to give you information. When we're talking about the regards to H Street, none of that was discussed ahead of time. We have emails from both the staff at CDOT and here in Fremont that say that they will not be developing H. So it had nothing in intention for H to be built. So our owner is not planning to build H, because even in pre-app notes, and he's been working on this job for almost 4 years with several different submittals to CDOT and to this team. So we're coming back and saying that was never planned financially. It was never understood. The idea that the CDOT permit was in place, that was put in place. It is correct that it is a temporary access permit, incumbent on the fact that you build out H. So of course, you don't want 2 entrances off of a state highway, which cause lots of traffic accidents and issues, which our owner would never want to be a part of either. He wants to show good diligence that he's willing to build it the way it is, knowing that H has no intention at this point, and we're able to bring on that access, what we already have approval for, which is temporary, only with the fact that H is being built. So that's the intent behind our approach, but having all the information that you have today adjusts how we see things. And part of those adjustments adjust one of the items that I wanted to address, which is the inaccuracy in our application. It is correct that it was wrong. If we had been given that staff review before we came to BOZA, we would have corrected it and clarified it and made sure that everyone was on the same page. So I apologize for that, first of all. That should never happened on our end. We should have had that correct. Item 2 is that when it came to the setback along Beaver Park Water Brush Hollow, that ditch is not something that we are asking for a setback on. That was a mistake in the application. So what you've read today and what she came through with on what we want is those 3 items along the bottom. So you address the first item, and now the second one we'll talk about, which is the confusion between whether it's a front setback or a side setback. Our confusion in our application was the same. It was not ill will in any way. We just misunderstood it because in our minds, because we had the access permit off of CDOT for Highway 115, even though it is temporary, that we planned on that being the access the whole time, and that's why we got that approval before we even came, believing that H was not a front setback. So once we had this knowledge and understanding, that changes how we look at the project. So I just wanted to put that out there before I start.
I don't recall at our August 20th meeting that we had conversation about H Street, did we?
I don't think so.
No,
It didn't come up in our conversation. Okay.
right.
All right, take a deep breath. I know you're nervous, but we'll get through this together, okay?
The problem I see is if you get to build this plan, and then with these setbacks, and then when, or if H Street is built, what do you do then? Your setbacks are illegal at that point in time, unless they're grandfathered in. I don't know.
So we're more than happy to work with the confines of the one along H. We are open to adjusting that. We currently have it at 13.2 feet. We're more than happy to look at something greater than that. When we look at the one along the highway, which will soon, depending on H, whatever that looks like, that setback being what it is doesn't seem to be an issue. You guys were happy with it the last time. We'd like it to stay because that gives us, our client, as much square footage as possible. Because of the setback along the ditch, we just lose a lot of square footage, and we're not allowed to build on the ditch end. So it's important for us to try to get as much square footage as possible on the project.
So where's this
That's
ditch
why.
at, exactly?
Right along the back.
Oh. Oh, all the way on the backside?
Yeah, that's the northern boundary.
And we've already created an entrance along H to come into the site once H is built. So that's what you see along the back side on the left. Above those buildings, there's an access there.
Okay, so
we've
those-
thought about that when it comes to the
So those
future.
storage units on our left, on the map, they could not be built until the development plan is complete, right? There's no.
Yeah,
cons-
nothing will
Right.
be built till the
No.
development plan is complete.
Right.
So if this board were to consider, I guess, some kind of a stipulation that, in other words, if we accepted the argument of the Department of Transportation that that there needed to be more setback of those storage units. If H Street is opened, then we could add that stipulation in a motion today. That if H Street is opened, that they would have to meet setbacks.
I feel that their CDOT permit should be more of a permanent access than a temporary one, because if later down the road, let's say the adjoining property goes to develop it, now H Street will be improved, and per the CDOT permit, it's only temporary, so no matter who develops H Street, once it's developed, that will be their front access.
Right.
The clarification should be that CDOT doesn't actually have any setback rules. They follow Fremont County's rules. So that setback rule is not actually CDOT's. CDOT's is only to address the access itself off of the highway.
Right.
And they clarified that with us when we talked to Arthur this
And I
last
was
week.
going by the brief paragraph from Mike at the Department of Transportation that said that his 10-foot setback, he didn't think would be adequate for sightline, right?
Yes.
So I'd like to actually address that comment, because there wasn't enough information in that comment for me to evaluate whether or not that's true. I don't know if the county would actually ask for additional right-of-way on this property as part of that. If the road was on completely off the property, typically in a low-speed urban road like this, the sight distance is measured 10 feet from the edge of the road back in. We have 13 feet. I'm happy to look at whatever technical evaluation there needs to be to evaluate the sight distance, and as my colleague mentioned, we could adjust this building if need be. But I don't think we would really ever need more than 10 feet for vision triangle unless the county would ask us to actually dedicate right-of-way as part of the site, which is a whole completely different issue.
The trouble out there is that, and I think I read there are 11,000 cars a day go down Highway 115, and that's probably, is that 55 or 60 mile-an-hour speed limit there?
50.
Is it 50?
That section's 50.
But you have this going on too, as far as sight lines, which are a concern to me. People pulling trailers and boats and, you know, this setback maybe doesn't give enough view, I'd say mainly to the east of what's coming at you at 50 miles an hour.
So the setback, the way I read that memo, he was discussing the setback, the potential setback and vision triangle turning out of the driveway onto H Street. So that, the CDOT, the vision onto Highway 115 is really a separate issue. That would have to be evaluated when the intersection is designed from H Street to 115. And this building, neither of these buildings would actually impact that vision triangle.
But H Street would be further down the road and give you a better, wider angle of view of what's going on too.
Not really, because you can see the driveway apron, which is kind of that thing that's
Yeah.
shaped like that. The road is like 85 feet or something. Don't quote me on the exact number. It's a long ways from the property line to the actual edge of concrete. You would be completely within the CDOT right-of-way before you had to make a decision on vision. So I don't think any building configuration on this site would affect the sight line from H Street to Highway 115. The other thing is CDOT generally on a new intersection, they generally like intersections to be perpendicular. So H Street coming in at this weird angle, I don't know that CDOT would even entertain that. And CDOT does have say on how the intersection gets designed.
Right.
But again, we weren't planning on, I don't know what the vision is for that road. We didn't plan on that because to date we hadn't thought we would even
Well,
have to.
who proposed, in all these discussions, who proposed the opening of H Street? The department?
It actually came from the CDOT permit, being it's a temporary access.
Oh, with CDOT.
Yes, it's the
So,
state.
what about the no left turn? That was mentioned.
Yeah, they've only given them 3/4 access. It's right in, right out, left in. No left turn accesses are allowed.
And I apologize because I wasn't, I misspoke last week because I hadn't, really thought about talking about CDOT. It's not restrictive to our use because we expect all of our traffic to come from Penrose and Fremont County. Yes, we can put a little sign and a little pork chop island there. It doesn't really affect our site plan. I have an exhibit. I don't know that I can provide any new information to you, but that really doesn't affect our project
Okay,
if we can't turn left out of there, because
Okay.
all of our traffic is anticipated to be coming from Penrose and points west.
all right, I'm not sure where we left off with your presentation.
Is there any way you could get the CDOT to give you a permanent access instead of this temporary one?
No.
Can't bark up that tree?
Well, we talked to Arthur this last week asking those questions, and he said the use of the word doesn't matter for them. Basically, what they're saying is that once H is done, even if he made it a permanent access, they have the right to revoke it. So temporary doesn't mean anything to CDOT. To them, that's just saying, make sure that you think about the fact that you will eventually have to close this when H is built, and we have accommodated for that already in our site plan, understanding that approach.
Okay.
Okay, so if H Street is improved, it's a 40-foot setback because it would be considered the front yard. Our department does not recommend approval on this due to Section 414.551, minimum setback of 40 feet. When H Street is improved, the access will then become the side yard off of the one that's adjacent to State Highway 115. That minimum setback is 25 feet. Per the BOZA Powers 7432, the department feels this is an unnecessary hardship the owner of the property is creating upon themselves. In Section 7433 BOZA Powers, the overall shape of the property does not make this property undevelopable. The conforming lot and can meet all minimum requirements of Section 414.5. It's the same thing for your side yard, which would then become your front yard if H is improved.
Well, bottom line, if H is developed, then both of your 115 access and your H Street setbacks would be incorrect, given this plan.
Yes, if H is developed, the director of the Fremont County Transportation Office feels it's a site safety issue, with it being only at the 10-foot from the property line and not the 40 that would be required.
Okay, well, it's obvious that there was lots of confusion, and I appreciate your explanations as to why things were not included, because you weren't
This is 150.
in tune with
This is
all of the issues.
the edge. This is
Anything
the
else from staff?
See the apron?
The only thing I want to say, being we do have the two new members, is I did attach your BOZA regulations to this packet, and on 743, it does state the BOZA shall have the power to grant variances from the provisions of this resolution, but only where all of the following conditions are found to exist. So if you could just make sure you look at all four of those regulations and make sure you fill all of the variances fit to be able to grant the approval.
Okay, so to assist the board, could have the applicant, because you mentioned at the outset that those parking spaces, that wouldn't be an issue. So if you could go back to the microphone and detail again, for the benefit of the board, what specifics you're seeking in the variance. Does that make sense? In other words, what are you willing to comply with? in the subdivision, or in the staff review regulations? And what are the specifics you're seeking relief for?
So we would seek relief for the setback, I'm not going to say front side or whatever. I'm going to say along Highway 115, we are seeking a setback of 10 feet versus whatever we think it is. We think it's 40, or it might become 25. I'm confused on that. We are seeking a setback of 10 feet along Highway 115. We are also seeking a reduction, a setback. This plan has a setback depicted of 13.5 or 13.3 feet on future H Street. We could actually, I don't know, we could live with something more than that, but less than 40 feet, such that it meets all sightline regulations that we would work out with the county engineer.
Okay. For the benefit of the other, go ahead.
Sorry, and just a clarification, we're willing to give all 3 parking spaces that were requested. So we're willing to comply with what planning would like us to do to make that follow suit. So 1 basically goes away tonight.
Okay. For the benefit of the other board members, my inclination, if we can fashion a motion, was that if, particularly on the 8th Street issue, fashion a motion that we could provide the variance if 8th Street is not developed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but what does that get you in the long run?
Well,
We have to come back through if they
well,
do?
no. If the final approval of the department and the Board of County Commissioners for the commercial development plan, the site development, if the intent is to, in that development plan, to improve H Street, then they would have to meet the standard setback requirements. So from our standpoint, we would approve the variance only if 8th Street is not developed. But if the Board of County Commissioners ends up saying 8th Street will be developed, then they would have to meet setback.
Which means if they're already built out, they'd have to move all their buildings.
Yes, and as a side
But
street.
you just told me that there wouldn't be anything built until the commercial development plan is approved.
Exactly,
with
yes.
that
I'm just
caveat.
clarifying, as a side street, as a side setback, if that's what we were to look at, it's still a 15-foot minimum setback requirement.
So if that we can treat that as a side, then we would just give you 15 feet. So if it's treated as a front, that's a different conversation. So of course, on our end, we would rather see an approval of something that works for everyone along that street, no matter what happens. So if H is never developed, it's still correct, because my client doesn't, if you got done with the entire project and a developer comes along and builds H, if it's going to be a problem for the county at that point because of what it is and it hasn't been approved through a variance, then he's in a sticky spot.
Yeah.
Because the planning team's not happy with the location and he's not gonna tear down a building. So we're trying to find that wiggle room in between the 40 and the 10 now on the setback along CDOT as well as over on the front, so that we have something buildable that the client can work with to keep moving and try to move forward with. We've been pushing through since January just to get to these meetings. So, and our CDP was part of that process. And so we've been waiting 9 months at this point to find out if we can or cannot build this job. And if I start to encroach into the site, it becomes an unprofitable job at some point. That's the word between undevelopable and unprofitable, is all the difference between whether you're just a jurisdiction or whether you're the owner. And I'm here on behalf of the owner.
Understand?
So at what point would it be considered a front yard versus a side yard setback?
Can you ask that one more time? I'm sorry.
The development of 8th Street is what determines whether it's front yard or side yard setback.
Yes, so the development of H Street, that's when CDOT wants to close the access on 115. So even if this was something that they do not develop, and the next person in line on adjacent properties develops H Street, CDOT wants to close 115 access.
Right, right.
And at that time, the side setback on 115 would be 25 feet?
It would be 25 feet if the adjacent to the state highway is the side.
But we were told August 20th that with this temporary CDOT access, there is not a sightline issue if we approve the variance.
That is correct, because if you are coming out of this driveway onto 115, you're going to be well south of the property line, and you're going to stop and take so your car is going to be parked off the property line, or your RV or whatever, before you make the turn. You don't stop that far back, 85 feet from the road. You stop a car length or so before you make the turn. So whether it's 10 feet or 0 feet or 40 feet, that building along 115 does not impact the sight lines to 115's driveway.
What is the distance from the edge of the property to Highway 115 through the ditch there? The length of the driveway virtually.
Don't know the exact number. I had it before. I think it's around 85 from the building, so it's probably about 75 feet. And it is
Well,
scalable on the drawings.
Even
but
somebody pulling a trailer.
even somebody pulling a trailer
could see.
would be pulled out well past the property line to make the turn.
Does anybody understand enough to make a motion? Or more than one motion?
Well, you want a contingent motion, don't you?
Well, in my mind, you could probably make a motion on the setback, on the request for variance of the setback of 115. And maybe consider that as one motion,
To 10 feet.
yeah.
And then you already agreed on the side to go to 15? Is that what the setback is now on the side?
Let's do separate motions.
All right.
Okay. Let's consider, do you want to provide a variance as a separate motion for the setback on Highway 115 as proposed? To allow a 10-foot setback? Is that right?
If it's possible to have separate motions, we would love to have more, love to have flexibility. If we can meet one of them and not the other one, we would love to have two different motions so that
That's what's
we have the
gonna happen.
flexibility of, maybe we can come back with a design that hits one but not the
Any
other.
concerns from the department about what our discussion is taking here?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
And this would all be subject to H Street not being built out. Should we say something in there
Well-
about that? Or does that all just
Well,
change if they
that'd
build it?
that'd be the separate issue on the side yard, front versus side yard setback. Because even if that access goes away, we're still talking about those storage units setback from 115, whether there's an access there or not. So that's the motion I'll consider now. Does the board want to consider a variance to allow a 10-foot setback instead of a 40? 40-foot setback. So that's one motion. I'll make that motion.
Okay, I was just gonna, okay, I'll second
I'll
it.
make that motion to allow the variance on the Highway 115 setback. Discussion on that motion. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Now, I said at the outset that we had already approved the variance at August 20th. from the county attorney's standpoint, does our actions here in separate motions today find that action to be moot? Or do we need to strike that variance just to clean things up?
It's to clean this all up. It's just to clean it all up. So
right.
between all the variances requested in the application, only one was addressed during the August 20th meeting.
Okay, so for the record, I'll make a motion that we reconsider and deny the variance that was approved on August 20th, just for the sake of cleaning up the record.
I'll second that.
All right, motion is second. Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye? Okay. You guys understand where we're at now? Yep. Okay. I'm making this up as I go. Okay, now, I sense that we're going to require them, from your initial questions, that they're willing to comply with the parking spaces. Okay, so we're not going to consider any variance on parking spaces.
Well, since we denied the first one, do we have to well, no, that's what it
Well,
required
that's what we
anyway.
just
Okay.
did. We wiped it clean.
All right.
So our next motion will be specific to any other variance, specific to setback. And we're talking now,
I do need a
Side versus front.
motion. I do need a motion on the parking being it's part of the application. I need a denial if that's what you guys are saying for
Okay.
the parking.
you want to make that motion?
I'm sorry, I don't, we need to deny the original?
Yes,
It was
per-
part of their application.
Per the
Okay.
application,
And
it's a
so to make a
variance
record of it,
request.
we need to deny that part of it.
Okay,
Yes.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion is second to deny the request for variance on the parking.
Okay.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Now, side setback versus front yard setback as we deal with the possibility of H Street. Does everybody understand where we're at?
Yes.
I mean, I can make a motion.
Well, is that going to go from 10 to 15 feet? Is that where we're at? On H Street? Because there was an original 21G was a request for 10-foot, where the regs say 15-foot, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
So we might need to,
So we'll-
that's 21G here.
So if H Street goes through, you'll consider that a front yard setback?
If H Street is improved, yes, it will be a front yard because CDOT will close our access.
And the
from
front
state
yard is a
highway.
15?
Front yard would be 40.
40,
40.
side is 15.
Side adjacent to a street is 15.
Okay, and I'm going back to the letter from Michael Witt, that he believes a 10-foot setback would not be sufficient for sightline needed for business entrance and exit. 10-foot setback would also restrict where drainage ditch could be built. Meaning a borrow ditch for the county road right-of-way.
Yes.
But he does not say how much footage would be needed for a borrow ditch drainage. He just suggests that it be denied. And that's what the department is proposing as well. I suggested whether you want to consider a contingency based upon development of H Street. But I will entertain a motion as to however you guys want to.
Well, we're talking 10 feet or 15 feet, right?
I don't know,
Well,
because
If it's remains a side street, it would be 10 to 15.
right, but if
That would
it
be the
it
variance.
becomes H Street, it's 40 feet.
Exactly. So if H Street existed right now, it would require to be 40 feet.
Right. But the
and see,
side,
as a former county commissioner who, we never really developed new streets, but I certainly would not. I mean, we have some county roads that are, I can't remember what, they're not a true county road right-of-way. And the one that rings a bell immediately is Windsor Avenue on the north side of Canyon City. It was basically is a lane without any,
This is platted road, so it is a county road, it's just not developed.
okay, but you see what I'm saying? I would hate to hamstring the department if H Street is developed and they needed a 40-foot right-of-way. And that's why my motion would be contingent, that they could have the setback, they could have the 10-foot setback if H Street is not developed.
So is there an opportunity to get with the Department of Transportation and have that conversation and revisit that option?
The only way to guarantee that H Street will not be developed is to do a vacation of right-of-way, and that application has not been applied for, so it is a platted road.
It's
I
a
can't
platted road,
guarantee
and
it's not
I
going
can
to
tell
be
you
developed.
historically, this is just my personal experience of 12 years in office, I can tell you historically, Board of Commissioners is not inclined to vacate rights of way. Not that you couldn't make the request.
Can 8th Street,
I'd still like to know what the cross-section is, because when he's mentioning borrow ditches, that implies to me that the county would need part of this land to build the right-of-way, because normally the borrow ditch is in the right-of-way, not on private property.
10-foot setback. There's a 10-foot utility easement surrounding your property line, so they would have access to your property.
Yeah, we have a 10-foot, yeah, and we're outside that 10-foot easement, yeah.
be a lot better.
So if you're denied, this variance on that side where H Street would go, what would that do to your storage units that you're proposing?
So if we had to provide a 15-foot setback there, we can make that happen by cutting a couple feet out of those storage units. That's probably not a deal breaker. If we had to have a 40-foot setback there, that's a deal breaker. And
Because it would
actually,
eliminate all those
it
storage
would
units.
eliminate that whole building. And actually, if we knew that we had to have, if we knew we had a 40-foot setback there, I'd probably look at rotating those units, just making the one along the Highway 115 longer. But we don't know, so.
Oh, then you would, yeah, I see what you're saying.
so where we're at right now is you have your 10-foot variance along the 115. And if we don't do anything else, you're bound by the 15-foot setback on H Street, which you're willing to do.
Or 40.
Yeah, we don't know which one it is. If it's 15, we don't need a
Well, as
variance.
of today, with H not built out, it's 15, correct?
Yes.
If they
But-
build 14, H Street out, you're in trouble.
But that raises an interesting quandary, because how can the department propose a 15-foot setback? Don't you, when you review these, don't you have to consider where the right-of-way is, whether there's a street there or not?
We do, yes, that's the reasoning for it all. The setbacks, it's next to a road, your side yard would be a 15-foot. So that gives plenty of room for CDOT to come in, do their maintenance, their improvements, their bar ditches, anything that they're needing.
I mean, over the course of time, and again, I'm going back from my experience as a county commissioner, if a property owner bordered a county road right-of-way that was not developed, that property owner could use that county road right-of-way to the center line as long as it was not a permanent structure. If you wanted to pasture goats in there, you could pasture goats in that right-of-way to the center line. But you couldn't build anything. And that's why I'm suggesting that I question how you can not just go from a 40-foot setback just because of the right-of-way.
I do not believe you could pasture goats in a right-of-way. That's incorrect. You can put a fence on your property line. This platted road is not in their property.
Well, our interpretation was that property owner could use that. I mean, they use it now. Look at where High Street dead ends against York. That property owner has High Street right-of-way full of vehicles.
Transportation office would have all the right to remove those.
Oh, I know,
Okay.
I know they do.
Okay.
I know they do, but I'm saying that property owner has taken the free will to use that to their own benefit until such time as the county calls upon its use of that right-of-way. That's not solving their problem.
No.
And because it is a permanent structure for us, we want to find the middle ground. We're more than happy to work within what they believe is there. The 40 feet puts a hardship on us. So that's why we ask for the variance of what we asked for. So 15 originally was the onset, then it goes to 40. That's a big differential.
I know.
So whether H gets done or not is a huge change for us on how we handle the property. But if we wait until we hear from CDP to understand
So
that,
if
then we have a hard time presenting a plan that's fully executed
So if there
and
was,
understood.
if there was a 40-foot setback, you would wipe out that building and you would extend those other storage units?
Well, the problem with that effect is that yet again, our access is currently along 115.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So you can't, I mean, otherwise that puts all the pressure back on the owner.
Then you
to
would have
provide.
to develop H Street.
Exactly. And that's what we're working with, the understanding that there's a cost understanding behind it for us as the general contractor.
Well, yeah, because now we're on the
And
verge
so-
of killing the project.
Yes. So that's why we're wanting to come to an agreement along the street that we want to work with everyone. We're not trying to be difficult by coming
No,
to
I
that
get it.
15.
Yeah,
So-
no, nobody said you're trying to be difficult. It's just, it's difficult.
Yes,
And-
a lot of variables, so.
And I don't know, building H Street, what CDOT would require, that's a completely different conversation when you're doing a street intersection. CDOT would, like I mentioned, might require the geometry be changed. They may require that left turn. They'd probably want H Street to be full movement, so CDOT would probably come back and require all of 115 to be widened for 500 feet or so east of H Street so that you could have the full movement with the access. And all of that is completely, that the project is dead.
Well, I can tell you it'd be a lot easier for me to make a decision if And I understand that that's not possible if the final approval of the commercial development plan was said and done. But we're sitting here in between.
You can make a motion on it being just a side.
Well, I'm going to go,
Side yard
I'm
being
gonna-
it's just a
I'll go
platted
back,
road.
I'll go back to my original motion, or thought for a motion, that I'll approve the variance to a 15-foot setback, contingent on H Street not being built in the final commercial development plan.
Isn't 15 the standard right now?
Yeah, we wouldn't need a
So
variance.
we wouldn't need
We wouldn't
that.
need a variance in
Right.
that case.
Okay.
We just let go. So you'd only have one variance at this point in time, which would be for the 115 exposure.
Yes, you would just need to deny
And
the 10
leave the rest of it
that's-
alone.
Yes.
And then if they ever developed H Street, you could come back for a variance
But that,
on your side street, but
that would be incumbent upon the Board of Commissioners to make clarification as to whether H Street is going to be built or not.
Yes.
Okay, that's my motion.
Ed, we need a motion to deny their variance request for the 10 feet.
okay, I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
And that will leave it at 15 feet. And you're okay with that?
So it'll still be considered a side setback within the CDP approval,
Yes.
not a front setback.
We're not reviewing the CDP right now, we're doing the BOZA meeting.
I understand that, but the clarification is very important.
Yeah, until H gets built, that's a side setback,
Okay,
right?
so your motion is to,
I don't remember.
Deny the 10.
Deny the 10 for
yes.
the side yard.
And that would leave it at the 15, which has been agreed to.
That would require a 15-foot,
Okay,
yes.
that's my motion.
okay, and we don't have to say anything contingent about H Street?
No, if things change where the county commissioners want that improved or whatnot, they'll need to come back in front of you before anything's
All right.
built.
All right, so I'll second.
All right, motion and a second to deny the 10-foot side yard
Yes.
variance.
Setbacks, yes.
Discussion?
I just have a question. Is there any development plans to do an H Street? I mean, is that just you're trying not to hinder the county in the future for that possibly happening, something that could happen 10, 20, 50 years in the future? Is that what?
Well, it depends
I'm trying
upon
to
what,
understand.
depends upon what the Board of Commissioners would require as part of this commercial development plan. They could force the issue. For years and years and years, it's just a platted right-of-way, like there are platted right-of-ways all over the county. But we're to the point to where the reality is that the Board of County Commissioners could force development.
And there's nothing there now, correct? There's not a road or of any kind now, right?
No, it's just.
It's just a right of way. Okay, I just. I'm trying to
Just a
understand.
right-of-way where they could put goats.
Not for goats. On the record.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? There being no further business, we stand adjourned.
Are you guys okay with all that? Okay. We made some progress.
And if you
We had
put-
quite a learning
put
curve for our
notes
new
on there-
members
Yeah, a
today.
little baptizing by fire there, is all right.
We had quite a learning curve for me. This is the most complicated